Hey there, everybody. How's it going? This is Jake, community developer here at Oracle, and I'd like to welcome you to another How to Komiser video. In this video, we're going to be covering Amazon S3 and how we can use Komiser to get some insight and to see how we can best optimize our use of S3. So I'm looking over here at the dashboard. So let's quickly go down to storage. And in this section, we can see an overview of our storage information in S3. So it goes without saying that each application is going to consume objects a little bit differently. But one thing is for sure is that regardless of the application and the requirements of the application, it's necessary to be able to have a clear view into what you have, what you're storing, and how much you're storing, and have that in one place. And that's what you see here in the Komiser dashboard. We can see the amount of buckets, we can see the amount of the size that we have, and this is very, very important, the size of the total amount of our storage, because this is what we're being charged on. So let's just have a quick look over at the storage classes here. Let's just go over to Frankfurt, which is the region where I'm usually located. Here we see the breakdown of the different storage class prices. And the standard class is the closest to the on-demand price. It's the most expensive price per gigabyte, and it should really only be reserved for those objects of yours that are frequently accessed and you want to offer the least amount of latency to your users or to the applications that consume those objects. It really is worth having a close look at your objects, how they're used and how they're consumed, to know if it's worth the price for your objects to be there. One thing that I would recommend is once you have a clear idea of how your objects are used, put a lifecycle policy in place to start making smarter decisions about where objects should be located. So to illustrate this, let's go over to an example. I just have an example here of, imagine in another life, if I was in charge of hosting Adam Andra's rock climbing website, and imagine this website had stores around 100 terabytes of rock climbing videos. If we were using the standard storage class, this would cost in the Frankfurt region, as of the recording of this video, which is August of 2022, it would cost $2,350 to host them in the standard tier. Say, for example, the videos that are viewed are only the 20% of those most recently uploaded videos, and the 80% of the other videos are rarely accessed. So we can put a lifecycle policy in place that will transition those unaccessed videos or those very infrequently accessed videos to a different storage class, saving us some money. So say, for example, we just keep the 20% of frequently accessed videos in the standard storage class. We will then be charged $470 for that, and the 80% of the remaining videos would go into infrequent access, which would bring the price down to $1,080. So the new bill will come out to $1,550, and this would be a reduction of $800 by simply putting a lifecycle policy in place. Let's have a quick look and see how we can actually create a lifecycle policy. So let's have an example of how we can actually create a lifecycle policy. So let's go over to the S3 management console. I'm going to go over to an S3 bucket that is just a test bucket over here. So this bucket is called komiser.cloud, and I just have a simple PNG file in it. So I'm going to go over to the management section of the S3 bucket, and I'm going to go over to create a lifecycle rule under lifecycle rules. And I'm going to give it a name, for example, infrequent access transition. And I'm going to choose the rule scope. So in this case, I want to apply this lifecycle rule to all of the objects in the bucket, and I'm going to acknowledge that that is what's going to take place. And the action that I want the rule to perform is to move current versions of objects between storage classes. And down here is where I'm going to edit and design the storage class transition workflow. So after the minimum amount of 30 days, I want to transition those infrequently accessed objects into the standard infrequent access class. If reliability is not that high on your priority list, maybe you can even consider transitioning into one zone infrequent access, which means that if that one zone were to go down, you would then more than likely lose the files. But for some use cases, this might make sense. But say, for example, that after the standard infrequent access storage class, if it's not accessed for another 90 days, you might want to move it into Glacier Quick Retrieval or Instant Retrieval, and we can put this as a transition step after 90 days. And let's just go ahead and create this rule. And that's pretty much it. Now, this lifecycle rule is applied to every object in the bucket, and it will follow those steps that we set out there. So what we've seen so far is how we can intelligently transition the objects that are already in our S3 buckets into the appropriate storage class. But one thing that caught my eye this week was the storage of compressed files and how we can optimize there. S3 recommends for us to compress the files before we upload them to S3, and of course you can choose the compression format. But I saw this Hacker News article which mentioned this tweet from Adrian Cockcroft, in which he mentions that AWS switched from gzip to zstandard and saw a 30% reduction of the compressed S3 storage. First of all, I misunderstood and I thought, oh, does this mean that we're all getting a 30% reduction in our S3 bill at the end of the month? And then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and then I saw AWS actually is a client of S3 itself, and it had a large amount of customer log files that were compressed using gzip. And by changing this compression form from gzip to zstandard, they were able to optimize 30% of S3 storage for their files, which is a very good applicable step for us. If you are in this boat in which you have a large number of compressed files, and if they're not compressed using zstandard, I would definitely recommend for you to decompress and compress again using zstandard. And how would you do that? Well, you would do that by going over to your terminal, and in this case I just have an S3 folder with one file in it, and I've downloaded zstandard, and I'm going to pass in the z flag and pass in the file, and there it has been compressed, and we can see that the resulting zstandard format file has been created, and this is what we would now upload as the compressed file. And hopefully with this you'll be able to see a reduction in the amount of storage that you need to store your files. That's pretty much it for this video. I hope it was informative, and thanks for watching.